All right, I'm back. My latest video is going to be a nuclear war between China and the United States, or more specifically, a escalation in the South China Sea that crosses the nuclear threshold, and it then escalates from there. And just I know a lot of past comments talk about realism or the fact that certain, conventional weapon systems aren't. No, this is just strictly to test the effects of the different nuclear warheads and what it'll have on the population and the damage and everything. It's not meant to be by any means a simulation of how an actual war would go, factor in casualties from conventional weapons, nor does it factor in long-term deaths through climate change, supply chain, food shortages. It's simply the immediate effect within 1 to 2 weeks of different nuclear attacks. So, having said that, what I'm going to do is they don't have modeled some of the bases. So I'm going to add bases in Japan, South Korea, and really that's about it as far as U.S. territory as well. That's really about it. That's the only thing that's going to be relative to this. And how this is going to start in this hypothetical thing. I'm going to turn the AI on. I'm going to turn the AI on for China. And it's going to start with China due to, say, we got into a conventional shooting match, and whether it's China attempting a Taiwan invasion or whether it's any number of ways a touch point can flash off, a flashpoint can touch off, whatever. And it's decided that we're going to go hot. So it's going to proceed with some single attacks. Just going to choose what I consider closer to the theater level. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say 250 kilotons is theater level. This is much stronger than, the initial atomic weapons dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but going to go ahead and hit some American bases. These are all going to be airburst at 500 meters. So now they've just taken out three U.S. military installations in Japan. Now in retaliation, the United States is going to expend 25%, I'm going to go 20% of their arsenal, and it's going to be a strictly military attack against military installations. So I'm going to go ahead and click this in real time. I'm going to go 10 times speed. You're going to see stuff's going to start firing off. We have some sub-launch tridents. Speed it up a little bit so this video doesn't drag on. I tend to make the videos a little bit too long for what the actual content is. So what we're going to see is, though, they're going to start striking targets in China. So China is now launching retaliatory attacks. These retaliatory attacks are going to start targeting additional air bases. And I'm going to pause this right here. flip over to China. And then I'm going to, now unlike, I'm going to specify they're going to attack civilian targets with any remaining weapons they have. And here's the reasoning behind this. China, warhead for warhead, and they're working on closing the gap, but warhead for warhead, they are much smaller stockpiles than the United States and Russia. They are increasing their stockpiles. They've actually got more silos than the United States has now. We don't know how many of those are actually utilized with actual ICBMs with nuclear warheads in them, and how many are just dummy for targets. People say, well, why would you do that? Well, the goal of a country is going to be to try to eliminate let's expend the remaining part of the U.S. arsenal. Now, I wouldn't consider this very realistic at this point. The United States would want to hold back some of their arsenal in case there's any follow-on with Russia. But in this particular example, we're going to go ahead and do it just to see what what kind of effect it would have on the population of China. Just going to skip forward a little bit and make sure we've gotten everything. Yeah, not yet. So we still had some bombers coming in. So to get rid of that stuff. Let's calculate casualties at this rate, at this point. And again, this kind of worst case scenario between a Chinese United States escalation. China does say they have a no first use policy. I want to specify that. When this started with them attacking the U.S. bases in Japan, that is a part of their doctrine and policy. Now, whether they'd adhere to it, it's hard to say. So what you see here is that China has a large amount of casualties. South Korea and Japan, being that targeting of the U.S. bases, suffered a high amount of casualties. The United States, 215,000, over 215,000. And again, one of the reasons is the amount of Chinese warheads versus United States warheads. And in this simulation, the AI tends to target military installations more so than population centers. I don't find that to be as realistic. I'm going to rerun this real fast, and what I consider a more realistic, as much as it can be, using that term, scenario. And in this scenario, I'm going to forget about the basis for the United States. And what this is going to represent will be a simultaneous thing where China going to expend %70 of their stockpile going strictly onto civilian targets. I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And then I'm going to pause. And I'm going to reverse this now. I'm going to go to United States. For the United States, I'm going to go reverse. I'm going to go 20% of their stockpile and 80% military targets. Is that realistic to nuclear strategy or nuclear strategy between the United States and China? I don't know. I'm not a part of either one of their defense industries, so it's just using some theories, I highly recommend reading The Evolution of Nuclear Strategy. It's a great book. I'm going to zip forward a little bit, just make sure there's nothing else going on. Okay, so let's go ahead and calculate what the casualties will be. So again, with China having a more limited nuclear stockpile, they're probably going to edge towards Countervalue, which is targeting population centers. And with the United States having a larger stockpile, and they're going to err towards going with Counterforce, which is trying to eliminate the enemy's ability to hit back. So what we see here is that China has still a large amount of casualties. Part of that could be just a crossover between their military installation locations and just the density of the population. You can see here, part of China is extremely, dense as far as population goes, and there's a large expanse of nothingness. United States, clearly, there's huge expanses, and even where there is some population centers, you still have large expanses of openness. That's going to mitigate some of the casualties. But you see here, there's a huge concentration of people, and China has the world's largest population. Now, just to quiet some of the naysayers, and like, well, there's no way that Russia wouldn't get involved or China wouldn't, back up Russia. When I did the Russian video, people mistake geopolitical allies with, a true alliance. And it's not like China and Russia aren't strategic adversaries, just as they may be partners in certain things. They share a border with each other. They're both two powers that have, their relationship has alternated between, positive and negative, or put in kind of simple terms. If I'm China and Russia and NATO is lobbing bombs at each other, why would I get involved? Let them, wreck themselves, and we're going to be here to pick up the pieces. Likewise, if United States and China is getting into it, is Russia necessarily going to get involved? Well, again, you never know until stuff happens. You never know what's going to happen. But people think automatically, just because there's some type of partnership there, that they're necessarily going to go all in. Even during the Cold War, we never knew 100% was the United States willing to sacrifice New York and Los Angeles for Berlin. Nobody really knew, and you don't know until that happens. Just like France had a policy that if the Soviet Union crossed over the Rhine River, they were going to hit them with their entire arsenal against their cities. Again, that's just crossing nuclear threshold is a huge undertaking. But just to quiet some people, I'm just going to now delve into Russia. And let's say that for whatever reason they decide they want to get involved. They're going to do a mix, say 60-40. And they're going to go 60%. So I'm going to let that play for a second. And now the United States they're saying, well, we're picking up and detecting attacks, what remains of our early warning radars, etc. We're going to hit back. So the United States, and I'm going to go same thing. So 50%. So this is just to take it one step further and see what happens now. And let me speed it up because, again, it's starting to drag. All right, get to the casualties. So everybody can be happy now, so I know what's going to say after seeing the video. Oh, why didn't Russia jump in? Or why didn't this happen? These are just to test out different scenarios. The more stuff starts going off, the longer it takes to calculate these casualties. Okay, so you see the United States losses jumped up tremendously. Russia, very similar amount of losses, especially per percent of population. So there we have it. So probably more losses than all the other wars combined that could transpire in a single day. So still got unplanned. This is certainly not the only simulator or game that I do, and I have a lot of other stuff unplanned, but been having a lot of fun playing around with this. So I wanted to continue putting out some videos on some of these different scenarios. And if anybody has any ideas or anything of stuff they'd like to see, please comment. Please let me know. Please like the video. Any of that good stuff. Like I said, I just make this for fun. So, good night.